For thousands of years, knowledge was locked away, copied by hand, guarded by elites, and controlled by power. Then one machine shattered that control, and the world was never the same. For most of human history, knowledge was rare, fragile, and dangerous. Ideas did not travel freely. They moved slowly, carried by the hands of scribes who spent months, sometimes years, copying a single book word by word. A mistake could change meaning forever. A fire could erase generations of learning in seconds. And access to books was limited to kings, priests, and the wealthy elite. To control knowledge was to control power. In ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia and Egypt, writing itself was revolutionary, but it was never free. Clay tablets, papyrus scrolls, and handwritten manuscripts required skill, time, and resources. In medieval Europe, monasteries became the guardians of written knowledge. Monks worked in silent rooms called scriptoria, carefully copying religious texts under candlelight. A single Bible could take years to complete and cost as much as a house. For ordinary people, reading was not just rare, it was impossible. This system kept society frozen. New ideas spread slowly, if at all. Authorities decided what could be copied, what could be taught, and what must be destroyed. Knowledge was not meant to empower the masses. It was meant to preserve the existing order. But long before Europe changed, something extraordinary had already begun in Asia. In China, centuries earlier, inventors experimented with printing using woodblocks. Entire pages were carved into wooden blocks, inked, and pressed onto paper. This allowed text to be reproduced more efficiently than handwriting, and it helped spread Buddhist teachings, government records, and literature. Later, movable type was developed using clay and metal. Yet despite these breakthroughs, printing did not completely transform society in the same explosive way it later would in Europe. The reasons were complex. Language systems, political control, and limited demand all played a role. Still, the idea existed. Words could be multiplied. By the 1400s, Europe was changing. Cities were growing. Trade was expanding. Universities were forming. More people wanted access to information. Legal texts, scientific works, religious writings, and classical philosophy. But the old system of hand copying simply could not keep up. And then, in the German city of Mainz, a goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg changed everything. Gutenberg was not trying to free knowledge. He was solving a practical problem. As a metal worker, he understood precision, molds, and mass production. His revolutionary idea was simple but powerful. Instead of carving entire pages, create individual metal letters that could be rearranged, reused, and printed again and again. Movable metal type. Around 1440, Gutenberg combined several existing technologies: oil-based ink, a screw press adapted from winemaking, and precisely cast metal letters into one unified system. This was the printing press. For the first time in history, books could be produced quickly, accurately, and in large numbers. The result was explosive. Gutenberg's first major project, the Gutenberg Bible, stunned Europe. It was beautiful, clear, and nearly identical across copies. What once took years now took weeks. What once cost a fortune now became accessible to merchants, scholars, and eventually common citizens. And once books became affordable, ideas became unstoppable. Printing presses spread across Europe like wildfire. Within decades, cities like Venice, Paris, London, and Amsterdam became printing hubs. Millions of books flooded the continent on science, medicine, law, navigation, philosophy, and religion. Literacy began to rise. People started reading for themselves instead of relying on authorities to interpret truth. This terrified those in power, because the printing press did not just spread information, it spread challenge. When Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to a church door in 1517, he likely never imagined how far his words would travel. But thanks to the printing press, his ideas were copied, printed, and distributed across Europe within weeks. The Protestant Reformation exploded, not because Luther spoke loudly, but because the press carried his voice farther than any human ever could. For For the first time, ordinary people could read religious texts themselves. Authority shifted. Power fractured. Wars were fought not just with swords, but with pamphlets and printed arguments. Science followed the same path. Before printing, scientific knowledge was slow, isolated, and often lost. After printing, discoveries could be shared, tested, and improved. Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, their ideas survived because they were printed. Diagrams could be copied exactly. Data could be checked. Progress accelerated. The printing press became the engine of the scientific revolution. It also reshaped language and culture. Before printing, spelling and grammar varied wildly. Printing forced standardization. National languages strengthened. Shared stories created shared identities. Books created communities of thought across borders. But perhaps the most radical change was psychological. For the first time, individuals could privately consume ideas. You did not need permission to think. You did not need approval to question. A book could sit quietly in your hands and still change your worldview forever. Authorities fought back. Censorship laws were passed. Banned book lists appeared. Printers were jailed or executed. But it was too late. Knowledge had already escaped its cage. By the 1700s, printed newspapers fueled political debate. Pamphlets inspired revolutions. The American and French revolutions were born not only from anger, but from printed ideas about rights, liberty, and equality. The printing press made mass movements possible. And over time, the machine itself evolved. Steam-powered presses in the 1800s increased speed dramatically. Mass literacy became a reality. Education expanded. Books entered homes, not just institutions. Knowledge was no longer sacred, it was shared. Today, we live in a digital world where information moves at the speed of light. But every website, every article, every message traces its roots back to that first press in minds. The internet did not free knowledge first. The printing press did. It broke monopolies on truth. It challenged authority. It empowered ordinary people. It made ideas stronger than armies. And that is why the invention of the printing press is not just a technological milestone. It is one of the most dangerous inventions ever created. Because once people can read, they can think. Once they can think, they can question. And once they question, the world can never be controlled the same way again. The printing press did more than print books. It printed revolutions, discoveries, and freedom itself. And even in a digital age, its legacy lives on every time a single idea changes millions of minds.